Hi, this is Chris with Nightfall Audiobooks, and I have for you something a bit different today. Thrift Store Horror is my collaborator on the channel. I use them for resources on what to read next and how to get books that I'm missing. And in some cases, I'm tracking down the wrong book entirely because it's the UK release and I already have the United States release. Anyway, recommendation was 13 Tales of Horror by 13 Masters of Horror. This is a compilation novel. It's all short stories. I have not read this before, but it came highly recommended by Thrift Store Horror. So we have stories by R.L. Stine, Caroline B. Cooney, Christopher Pike, D.E. Atkins, A. Bates, Jay Bennett, Carol Ellis, Diane Ho, Lael Littke, Sinclair Smith, J.B. Stamper, Ellen Emerson White, and Patricia Windsor. Half of these authors have worked with Scholastic and Point Horror in the past. This should be pretty fun. And we all know about R.L. Stine and Christopher Pike, right? Believe it or not, I haven't really read any Diane Ho, or Sinclair Smith, or Caroline B. Cooney, but I do have a Cooney novel in the works, so stay tuned for that. I will be reading one story from this compilation and then publishing that as its own episode. I'm going to use this book like glue. If there's any holes or gaps or weirdness going on in my schedule, I'll be using one of these stories to fill that void. Just something fun to do. So let's begin. If you would like to get in touch with me, you can write me an email, nightfallaudiobooks@gmail.com. I am also on YouTube at Nightfall Audiobooks. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the join button to show your support. I also have a Patreon page, patreon.com/nightfallaudiobooks. So tell your friends, tell your mom, tell whoever you think would like to listen to me narrate them a story. Thank you very much for listening, and let's begin. Welcome to a Nightfall Audiobooks production of The Guiccioli Miniature by Jay Bennett from 13 Tales of Horror. It was past midnight and the orchestra had stopped playing. He got up from his seat at the table in the cafe and walked across the huge Piazza San Marco. He turned and went past the facade of the cathedral, past the Doge's palace, which gleamed white with all its tracery, and then down between the two high pillars to the water's edge. He stopped and looked out at the canals. With his eyes he followed the gliding of a gondola, and then he saw an empty vaporetto, ghost-like and fast-moving, far out in the center of the channel. And he was looking out across St. Mark's Canal to the dim outlines of San Giorgio Island, when a shadow fell across the pavement, and he heard a man's voice. "You American?" Jerry nodded slightly. "Just come to Venice?" The stranger was a tall, lean man with a haunted look in his eyes. Even though the night was damp and hot, he wore a coat and an old hat with the brim turned down. His hands trembled as if he had a fever. Out on the channel, the vaporetto vanished into the darkness. "Been here a few days," Jerry said. The sleeves of the man's long coat were frayed, and his lean face had a stubble of a beard on it. He's down and out in Venice, Jerry thought, and so he wasn't surprised when he heard the man say, "Maybe you can help a fellow American." Jerry waited. Then he saw the man put his long hand into his coat pocket and draw out a small object that glistened in the half-darkness. "Give me 10 for it, and it's yours, kid." "What is it?" "A miniature. I painted it myself. It's worth a good 100, 200, more. But give me $10, and you'll have something to take home to your girl." He put the miniature into Jerry's hand, and it was cold, almost icy to the touch. $10. You're about 18, right? You have a girl, right? Bring her something from Venice." Then he asked, "How long are you going to be here, kid?" "Till tomorrow afternoon." "Then you're going home?" "Yes." "Home," the man said, and was silent. And all the time they were talking, the icy miniature lay between Jerry's closed fingers. Suddenly, the man spoke again. "Give me $10. It'll be the best buy you'll ever make." His hand grabbed Jerry and pulled him into a little pool of light. "Take a good look at it." Jerry lifted the miniature into the spill of light. He saw that it was beautiful. "The Guiccioli Miniature," the man said in a hushed voice. "A copy of the Guiccioli Miniature. The original is in the Pitti Palace in Florence. I stood there and copied it day after day until they wanted to throw me out. The Guiccioli Miniature." It was the face of a very beautiful woman with brown, liquid eyes and auburn hair. Her features were small and perfectly shaped, but it was the eyes that haunted Jerry, the amazing eyes. He looked up slowly, and now the eyes of the man were glittering. "I came here years ago to be a great painter, and I'll soon die, and all I have to offer is a copy. My whole life is nothing but a copy. Nothing. Nothing. Give me $10 for the picture." Jerry looked down again at the miniature, and then, suddenly, with a shock, he remembered. Teresa Guiccioli, Lord Byron, the great romantic poet. The two of them had been in love. Byron must have had the miniature painted to carry with him when they were apart, and so this was Teresa Guiccioli, Byron's Countess Guiccioli. How about it? Jerry hesitated. I've got very little money left myself, he said. I came over here with only a little money. I'm a college student, so you can see His voice trailed off into silence. The look in the man's eyes pierced him. The stranger seemed so desperate, so alone, so filled with dread. He began to plead. The original is priceless. Go to the pity and compare it with this copy. You won't be able to tell the difference. Byron had it painted by one of the great artists of the day. The original is worth $100 grand. $100 grand, kid. And I'm offering it to you for $10. I'm broke. Nobody wants to buy it from me. I need money. I need it badly. Anything I can get. Out on the glimmering canal, the lean form of a gondola wavered into view, and then slowly faded into the darkness. The sound of a boat whistle came from a great distance. It was a haunting, mournful sound. All right, said Jerry. I'll buy it. They moved out of the pool of light, and Jerry gave the man the money. He dropped the miniature into his pocket. It's the best buy you ever made. The man's voice was now mocking and bitter. What are you going to do with the money? Jerry asked. Eat, and then get a ticket out of here. Where to? Where can a doomed man go? The man's eyes glittered and then faded into the darkness. Jerry stood there a long time. Then he turned and made his way back across the great square and past the empty tables of the cafes. He went into a long, gloomy arcade, and from there along the quiet alleys and narrow streets. He passed over a narrow bridge and came at last to his pension, the little boarding house he was staying at. The whole time he walked he felt as if he were being followed. He felt as if a long, lean shadow were walking behind him. He turned to look over his shoulder a number of times on the way. No one was there. There was nothing behind him but the empty alleys and streets, and the night. Jerry Moore went into the pension with its peeling walls and climbed up the dark flight of stairs. He opened the door of his little room and went in. He turned on the light and looked again at the miniature. He thought of Byron and the lovely poetry he had written. She walks in beauty, like the night. He could still remember that from English class. He looked at the terrifying beauty of the woman in the miniature. Subtly, the strange, glittering eyes of the man came into his consciousness. He heard the despairing words again, even though he tried not to. Where can a doomed man go? Suddenly, the miniature grew even icier to his touch. The beautiful face of the woman began to seem almost repellent to him. His hands became clammy. Jerry got up and went to the old streaked mirror that hung on the wall. It was his own face that looked back at him, but it had changed somehow. His face was now white and drawn with fear. His eyes had become two black pools. Where can a doomed man go? And now Jerry felt that for some strange, inexplicable reason, with the passing of the miniature to him, he, too, had become a doomed man. The painter had passed a curse to him. Jerry turned out the light. He went over to the window and opened it wide. He stood there looking down at the dark waters of the canal. He knew that these were the same dark Venetian waters that Lord Byron had looked into in 1819, when he had first seen the miniature of his beloved Countess, Teresa Guiccioli. Beloved? No. Repellent. Terrifying. Jerry's face was tight with fear. He looked as frightened as the poor painter had looked when they had made their bargain near the canal. Then Jerry shivered slightly and turned away from the window. His sleep that night was restless. He awoke several times. Once he was sure he heard something. He sprang right out of his bed. He stared straight ahead and broke out in a cold sweat. He knew he could not stay in this room any longer. He dressed in a panic. He stood for an instant in the center of the room, stock still, his eyes fixed on the doorknob. He could have sworn that it was beginning to turn slowly. Then he screamed, and the knob stopped turning. After a while, Jerry went to the door. He turned the lock very carefully and very slowly. He opened the door cautiously, an inch at a time. He peered out. The hallway was dim, but he could tell it was empty. There was no one outside. Jerry closed the door. He went to the window of his room and stood there, looking down at the canal as he had earlier in the evening. It was then that he made his decision. He went to the bureau and picked up the miniature. He looked at it for the last time. Then he went over to the open window and threw the tiny painting down into the black water. There was a splash, and then a fast silence. And in that silence Jerry felt, for the first time since he had met the mysterious painter, like himself again. He felt as if a great weight had been lifted from him. He was free of the curse, if there was one. Then he began to laugh silently and said aloud, "Silly superstitious fool." He went back to bed. This time he slept soundly and didn't wake until the sun was streaming in through the open window. Just before his plane took off that afternoon, the stewardess came around with a selection of magazines and newspapers for the passengers to read. Jerry took one of the Italian newspapers. He settled back in his seat and began to read it. It always gave him pleasure to speak and read Italian. That was one of the reasons he had come to Italy, to improve his Italian. There was a slight smile of pleasure on his face as he began to read. He slowly turned the first page. Then the smile slowly left his face. He had come upon the picture of a man, the man he had met by the canal, the sad painter. The painter was lying on his back on a cobblestone street, his face turned up to the sky. Jerry read further. The painter had been one of 3 men who had stolen the Guiccioli Miniature from the Pitti Palace. Then he had double-crossed his partners and had run off with the treasure. His partners had finally caught up with him in Venice after chasing him all over Italy. The police had captured the murderers and were now searching desperately for the priceless miniature. Jerry slowly put down his newspaper. "Is anything wrong?" the stewardess asked him. Jerry did not answer. This has been a Nightfall Audiobooks production of The Guiccioli Miniature by Jay Bennett from 13 Tales of Horror. Hi, this is Chris with Nightfall Audiobooks, and thank you for joining me for my production of The Guiccioli Miniature by Jay Bennett. That was really fun. The way that the painter was described, I thought that he was haunted and he was desperate to find someone to buy the miniature because if he did, it would release the curse. Then I figured it probably drains all your resources while you're at it, so he wasn't able to leave Italy and go anywhere else because he was broke. So he was preying on college kids or tourists or people from out of town, and once they bought the miniature, then they bought the curse. And Jerry thought the same thing. So he takes the miniature, which he thinks is a copy, throws it, gets rid of it, and what he really threw away and lost forever was the real deal. And all that painter was doing was trying to find $10 for a bus ticket somewhere to get away from the police. What a desperate gamble. This read more like a Twilight Zone episode, which has its own kind of quiet horror. I recommend this story. It's a lot of fun. It's a very good short fix for giving you a little taste of horror to get your day going. So what should I read next? I don't know. Send me an email, nightfallaudiobooks@gmail.com. I am also on YouTube at Nightfall Audiobooks. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Any help is greatly appreciated. I also have a Patreon page, patreon.com/nightfallaudiobooks. So tell your friends, tell your mom, tell whoever you think would like to listen to me, tell them tales of horror. Thank you very much for listening, and I will see you next time.